captured, put in cages, and sent to a place called NIMH.
What's up, nerds? We're talking about The Secret of NIMH, that animated movie that scarred an entire generation and made you question if you were actually watching something made for kids.
I bid you welcome.
This was not your average talking animal flick. There were no catchy songs or goofy sidekicks.
Hey, Miss Mouse, don't worry. I'm okay.
We're going to dive deep into why The Secret of NIMH is one of the most unsettling animated films ever made, the real-life horror behind its story, and how Don Bluth rebelled against Disney to make something totally different. Let's start with the basics. The plot is pretty simple. Mrs. Brisby needs to move her home, where she lives with her children, and one of her children is sick, by the way, before a plow destroys it out in the field. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Nah, instead of just moving, she gets pulled into a dark, twisting mystery involving genetic experimentation, murder, and ancient mystical forces? Her husband, Jonathan Brisby, was murdered off-screen before the movie even begins. The rats of NIMH, once ordinary rats, were injected with experimental drugs, giving them human-level intelligence, but also cursing them with lifespans much longer than normal, meaning they have to watch their loved ones die. The film quickly turns into a political power struggle between the rats as the sinister Jenner plots to overthrow the leader, Nicodemus, and Mrs. Brisby, who's just trying to save her family, ends up stuck in the middle of a conspiracy. This ain't The Rescuers. This is grim, eerie, and full of existential dread. Here's where things get even more messed up. The movie is based on the book Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH from 1971 by Robert C. O'Brien, which was inspired by actual scientific experiments on animals. NIMH is a real place, the National Institute of Mental Health. The book and film are loosely based on actual experiments where the rats were subjected to intelligence-boosting drugs. I'm not making this shit up. The whole super intelligent rats concept, not entirely fiction. So yeah, this isn't just a fantasy story. It's based on the ethical nightmare of turning animals into unwilling test subjects and the horrific consequences of playing God.
Our world began changing.
Hey, this film only exists because Don Bluth, who was formerly a Disney animator, was fed up with how soft and safe Disney movies had become. He wanted to bring animation back to its dark, mature roots like Bambi and Pinocchio, movies that weren't afraid to show real danger. Bluth literally quit Disney with a group of animators and formed his own studio. His goal? Make animation serious, emotional, and terrifying again. The Secret of NIMH was his first film, and it went hard. Bluth didn't just out-Disney Disney, he made something far darker, weirder, and more ambitious than anything they were willing to touch at the time. And who can forget the nightmare scenes from this film? First, there was the scene with a great owl. Mrs. Brisby seeks out help from a massive ancient owl who casually eats a live insect in mid-conversation. His glowing eyes, his raspy voice, his eerie cave, pure nightmare fuel. And his advice? Basically, yeah, you're gonna die, but go talk to the rats first. Thanks, bro. We get a flashback to the rats' time in NIMH, where we see them being injected with syringes and keeling over in pain. They're locked in cages, experimented on, and left to die in the lab. Some of them go blind or become too smart to function. If you saw this as a kid, you probably didn't fully grasp what you were watching. We had Jenner's death scene. This dude is evil. He murders Nicodemus, tries to take over the rats, and then gets into a brutal sword fight with Justin. Jenner ends up impaled on a sword, and then his own henchman betrays him and finishes him off. Hey, this is a G-rated movie, by the way. I'm not sure I mentioned that. And then we've got this mysterious stone. The film builds up this mystical amulet that's tied to courage and sacrifice. When Mrs. Brisby's children are about to drown, she activates it with sheer willpower. Her eyes glow, fire erupts around her, and she starts levitating. As a kid, you were like, cool magic, but as an adult, you're like, what eldritch force did she just unleash on the world? So even today, if you watch it, Secret of NIMH feels like a one-of-a-kind movie. It was dark, complex, and didn't treat kids like idiots. It had gorgeous hand-drawn animation with incredible lighting and detail, all made on a budget that was a fraction of what Disney had. It didn't sugarcoat death, pain, or moral dilemmas. It took risks that animated films almost never take anymore. And yet, this wasn't a massive box office hit. Why? Well, partly because it was too dark for young kids, too kiddie for older audiences. MGM barely marketed it, and it was released the same time as E.T., which basically devoured every other movie that summer. We're not even going to talk about The Secret of NIMH 2, or we're going to pretend like that didn't happen. So if you grew up watching The Secret of NIMH, not just because it was good, which it's amazing, but because it was different. It was unnerving, it was mysterious, and it certainly did not hold your hand. So what do you think? Have you seen The Secret of NIMH? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Did this movie mess you up as a kid? What was the scariest moment for you? And if you like this deep dive and enjoy the weird world of movies like I do, please hit that like, subscribe button, and even ring the little bell to make sure you get all the weirdness that the Nerd Crypt has to serve up. You guys are awesome out there. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. See you soon.